Okay, so we're going to get started. Good morning, everybody. My name is Elizabeth Aloni, and I'm with Checkups Media. We're the largest media company in the New York City area with over 70 newspapers, magazines, and websites throughout Queens, Brooklyn, the Bronx, Manhattan, Westchester, and Long Island. And we are thrilled today to have Financial Planner Jay Mota to talk about getting your financial house in order. I'm going to let you know a little bit about Jay, and then I'm going to turn it over to him. So Jay is proudly married with 2 daughters and 2 sons. He was born and raised in the Bronx. After high school, he enlisted with the U.S. Marines and later again served the Army National Guard. His career in financial services began in 1997. He studied financial services at NYU and has a degree in business. Athletically, he's run the New York City, Chicago, Boston, and Marine Corps marathons. Oh, wow. It's his mission to be a resource, to create value in the lives of others. He's continuously working to improve himself so that he can help as many people as possible in all areas. He's disciplined and governed by his principles. His clients work with him because he takes the time to educate them about planning for their financial needs and concerns. Whether it's saving money, getting ready to retire, or discussing insurance, it's his objective to help his clients prepare for whatever may happen in their lives. Ultimately, he works with his clients as a resource to fulfill their needs and expectations. His own agenda is not a part of that. He's committed to his practice. Recently, he was awarded the #1 financial services representative in the country for the 2nd consecutive year, otherwise always finishing the top 1 percentile. He's been published as a columnist regarding financial matters, and outside of his professional work, he's nationally recognized for his involvement in the community. The Building Blocks Foundation is a nonprofit he started that serves the homeless youth attending New York City public schools. It is my great honor to introduce Jay Mota and turn it over to him. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And again, my name is Jay Mota, and I'm a financial planner with the Prudential. I have a financial planning team, and we work to help our clients in many areas in the financial planning sector, with everyone on the team having their own expertise. I want to thank also Checkups Media for putting this together and everyone for joining us this morning. I hope everyone is in good health and continues to stay safe. The recent events of the pandemic will forever change our future. And a lot of my clients have experienced financial matters that they've never experienced before over the past few months. And we've seen things that I don't think my generation or previous generations and hopefully future generations will ever see. So we're going to cover a lot of different things today, and we're going to move at a pretty good pace just so we can cover everything. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. They will be moderated. My contact information, my phone number is there on the screen. My email address will be made available to everyone as well, so you can email and or call any of the questions you have, and myself or anyone on my team can definitely help you out. So here we go. Once I can get my computer to cooperate, there we go. So today we're going to discuss your financial situation. We're going to talk about things like creating a budget, how to monitor your budget. We're going to talk about debt management, protecting your assets, prepping for retirement, and if you're interested in also creating a legacy. Before we get into that, let's talk about organizing your financial paperwork. My best friend passed away now some time ago, about 7 years. And when he passed away, his wife had no information regarding his passwords or what accounts he had. She didn't even know all of the financial accounts he had. So oftentimes, when I learned from that, and oftentimes couples don't speak to one another about accounts they may have, whether it be memberships, passwords, etc. So it's important to take an inventory of these types of accounts and memberships, put the login and password information down on an inventory, and store that in a very safe place. God forbid something happens, you want to have that information readily available for one another. Other important items, such as tax returns, paycheck stubs, canceled checks, all of these things you want to keep for a time period for referencing, and especially when it comes to doing financial planning, these things are going to be important in order to reconcile your accounts and to really put together a plan. Documentation when you're buying and selling a home, especially when you're doing improvements to a home. When you make improvements to a home, having that documentation can help towards the cost basis. And when you're looking at capital gains tax, having evidence that you've improved that property will definitely help you in that situation. Major purchases, you want to keep receipts for major purchases. You may forget where you bought something from, and you may forget whether or not you bought the warranty. Are you going to rely on the individual business to confirm whether or not you bought that warranty, or do you want to have proof you have it? So making sure you keep these documents are very important. However, you do want to get rid of paperwork after a period of time. And if you're like me and you scan things and you save things to an encrypted cloud server, you want to make sure you're shredding documents, and you want to make sure that you're getting rid of anything that can be used to steal your identity. Utility bills, credit card bills, things of that. A shredder is very inexpensive. Definitely recommend getting a shredder to manage disposal of your important documents. So let's jump into it. Budgeting. Budgeting is an important part and the foundation of any financial plan. A budget allows you to track your spending, manage debt, curb impulsive purchases, and it affords you the opportunity to find ways to save. So track spending. If you don't know where you're spending your money, you may look back and say, geez, you know, I make I can't tell you, almost, I would say just shy of 100% of people that I speak to say, I make so much money, I don't know where my money goes. And that's because they don't live by a budget. They don't have a budget. They don't track where they're spending their money. Until I looked at my budget, I didn't realize how much I was spending on coffee on a daily basis, a weekly, monthly, annual basis. It was cheaper for me to buy a coffee machine for my office. But without putting that into a budget, I would have never have known. Managing my debt, we may not realize how much debt we're getting into. We may not realize how much we have to spend on a monthly basis to maintain our debt. So looking into a budget will help us, and being able to look at our income versus expenses on the budget will help us to manage that debt. Additionally, when we talk about impulsive purchases, I mentioned to you about me buying coffee. Well, if I didn't realize through preparing a budget how much I was spending on coffee, how would I know that I have a problem? How would I know that I was spending too much money on that? Or if I have a budget, I know what my cash flow which is available to make purchases. So if I see something I want to buy, I'm cognitive of what my financial situation is and whether or not I can responsibly buy it. If I don't know how much money I have or what available funds I have, I may not know that I can purchase it. And sometimes we make purchases and we think to ourselves, geez, you know what? I really shouldn't have bought that because I really can't afford it. And we find out too late. Ultimately, with a budget, however, by knowing where your money is going and what you have coming in and what's going out, ultimately, it'll afford you ways to save more money in the future. One of the tools you're going to receive is this monthly income and expense summary. It's something that I'm going to email to everyone. It's going to help you track how much money you have coming in versus how much money is going out. This is a vital part of creating a budget. It'll also help you create a cash flow analysis, which will let you know how much cash you have on a monthly basis. So if you're looking at spending money on a car and you want to know whether you can afford the car payment, this will allow you to know, you know, we have so much cash flow on a monthly basis, we can't afford the car or we can't afford that car. There are two main expenses that we have, or types of expenses that is. You have fixed expenses and you have variable expenses. Fixed expenses are expenses that you need to live with. Those are the bare necessities. You have your mortgage and rent, food, utilities, your transportation costs, healthcare, insurance, property taxes, and you have alimony and support if that's something that pertains to you. Those are fixed expenses. Those are the bare necessities that you need on a daily basis in order to survive. Your variable expenses, such as entertainment, vacations, hobbies, sports, home improvement, gifts, charitable giving, and clothes, those are all expenses that you could modify on how much you spend on what. If you know that you have cash flow and you're covering your fixed expenses, and we're going to talk about, you know, saving for emergencies and such, but then it lets you know how much you can spend on variable expenses. You want to plan to have your fixed expenses covered at all times. The variable expenses are things that you want to monitor on how you're spending that money and what you're saving for and where the money's going. Debt management. Debt management is a huge part of financial planning because if you are not properly managing the debt that you have, you could be throwing a lot of money out of the window. People would say, well, I want to make 15% on my investments. Well, a dollar saved is a dollar earned. If you're not paying high interest rates, and if you're not carrying a lot of debt, well, you're actually making the interest that you're not paying out. So you can make money by not having debt because you're not paying that interest rate. But not all debt is bad. You have good debt, reasonable debt, and bad debt. Good debt, such as a mortgage, because your house, assuming it'll accumulate value over time and you're earning equity every time you make a payment, is considered good debt. Reasonable debt is an automobile that you finance over 5 years, but you're going to keep it for 5 years or longer. So yeah, maybe it's not going to be worth exactly what you paid for it as soon as you drive off the lot, but you're going to keep it for a long period of time, so it's worth paying off. But bad debt is when you buy that pair of shoes for $100 or $150 and you're paying 29% interest and you're making your minimum payments. You're never going to pay off those shoes. So that's bad debt, and that can really get you into trouble. And ultimately, you're making credit card companies rich, and you're not really helping yourselves. So that goes back to how you spend your money and the type of debt that you incur. But when you have debt, you want to manage that debt and say, okay, I want to get rid of high interest rates first. I want to pay that off quickly because that's costing me the most amount of money. If you can consolidate, there are a lot of companies that will allow you to consolidate debt for zero interest for an introductory period of time. So it's wise to look at that and see, well, can I pay this off in that period of time? And guess what? If you realize you can, great. But if you can't, minimize the amount you consolidate to an affordable rate, because there's no sense in consolidating debt into a plan like that when you can't meet the terms. And if you exceeded the terms and you haven't paid it off, they're going to retroactively charge you all that interest. So you have to be careful with that. But it's a good way to get rid of debt at a very inexpensive rate. And obviously avoiding unnecessary debt, goes back to curbing impulsive buying, not spending beyond your means, etc. But managing debt is a big part of it because debt will eat away at your ability to save money. So what do you need a savings for? You have your emergency fund, protection solution, big ticket items, retirement, and caring for family. Those are the things that people generally save money for. When we talk about an emergency fund, we talked about our fixed expenses a few slides ago. That is what your emergency fund is contingent on. If you have a monthly, let's say your monthly expenses all in is $5,000, that's your fixed expenses. Those are expenses that don't change on a monthly basis. If you're single and you're working, you should have no less than 3 months worth of your fixed expenses in an account at all times. And that's your emergency fund. If you're married and both of you have equal, or if you have a domestic partnership and both of you have equal incomes, again, 3 months is suffice. But if you're married with a family and maybe you have one income coming in, or you have uneven incomes coming in where one partner makes more than the other significantly, you want to increase that savings bucket to 6 months. Let's look at what we've just gone through with the COVID. In reality, we started shutting down in March. We're now in June. We're moving into 4 months of everything being shut down. Now, unfortunately, some people lost work. Some people were able to retain income. But this is not something that we could have predicted. Obviously, I think we would have prevented it if we could have. But we could have prepared for it. And having an emergency fund, that's what it's important. That's why it's important. Because when something like a COVID happens that we can't control, you have money set aside. And believe it or not, having an emergency fund reduces stress, not only on a daily basis because you know you have it covered, but God forbid you enter a crisis situation and you need the money, it's going to reduce the stress because you know you have things covered. We all know that money is a big stress creator. So having an emergency fund and making that a primary focus in your savings is very important. Protection, a lot of people don't think about protection like insurance as a part of a savings plan. and we're going to talk about that. But having adequate protection will prevent a large amount of money coming out of your savings if you're not adequately protected. So that's important. Big ticket items, planning for big ticket items. We have 3 buckets that I use, and it's quite elementary. We have bucket number 1 is today money. Bucket number 2 is your big ticket items, short-term savings, and bucket number 3 is your long-term retirement and 10 years plus savings. Your emergency fund is bucket number 1. Your retirement is bucket number 3. And in the middle is everything else. So your big ticket items, you want to travel around the world, you want to buy a major appliance, you're going to buy a car, whatever the case is, you save in that middle bucket. And we can talk about what consists of that middle bucket, but understand that that money is earmarked particularly for big ticket items, and that money is working for you in order to afford those big ticket items. But it's not coming out of the long-term money, which can create taxes and fees, and it's not coming out of your emergency fund, which could diminish your ability to pay for things. If you use your emergency fund and you have an emergency, then what are you going to use? You're going to go back to your long-term bucket, withdraw money from your retirement, pay penalties and taxes. Big ticket items, again, you want to save for them, you want to account for them. They got to come out of that middle bucket. It doesn't affect your emergency bucket, doesn't affect your retirement bucket. Retirement is for retirement. That's your large bucket at the end. And caring for family, I'm in the sandwich generation. I think a lot of folks in my age, 30, 40, 50 years old, maybe in a sandwich generation where you have children you're taking care of and you have your parents that you're taking care of. And therefore you're right in the middle. And we call that the sandwich generation. And caring for family is something that you may need to add to your budgeting and your savings, because you want to make sure that you have the money to take care of them long term. So securing your financial future, take advantage of all available resources. A lot of these resources come from your employer. You have retirement savings through your employer. You may have voluntary benefits. I'll give you a quick example. In the past, when I was selling and buying a home, I had no idea that the legal services I had through my company offered to pay for the closing, the legal costs that were associated with closing and selling a house and buying a home. That's $1,000, $1,300 each transaction. I was having lunch with a colleague. He told me he used it and he ended up saving that money. Had I not had that conversation, I personally wouldn't have known I had that benefit through my benefits at work. Would have cost me a few $1,000s that I didn't have to spend. So it's important that we know what available resources we have, what tools we have in our arsenal in order to maximize our savings and our goals. Professional guidance. A lot of us are do-it-yourselfers. I mean, the world today is DIY, right? Do it yourself. We have the internet. I tell my kids the greatest resource in the world is the internet. It's also probably the most reckless resource in the world because there are so many sources that we don't know if they're good or bad. But here's an example. I do not go on the internet if I'm not feeling well to read how I'm feeling and determine what diagnosis I'm going to give myself. I trust the doctors. The doctors are staying in tune with the latest technology. They're staying in tune with latest illnesses or prescriptions and treatments, etc. So I take professional guidance from my doctor on my health and not rely on external resources. And I think when you're dealing with your financial services, you're dealing with law or taxation, you have to have professional guidance in order not to be reckless and make reckless decisions. Now, here's one of those tough points that I bring up to my clients that maybe doesn't sit always as well, but taking an active role. I've always taught my children that when you point your finger at somebody else, you have 3 fingers pointing back at you. And oftentimes I'll speak with clients and they'll share with me stories about how they weren't aware of certain products that they bought or performance levels that they received. And maybe they've had this product for years. And I have to ask them, well, have you ever looked at the paperwork? Did you ever do anything to make sure what you have is what you thought you had? This is very common with insurance products. A lot of people buy insurance products and they think they have a certain type of protection, but then they learn later on that it's not what they thought they had. And yet they waited 10 years to have it reviewed, and then it's 10 years later. So you have to take an active role in your planning and understand what it is you have and look at your paperwork and read what you have. You can't take for granted. Communication gets missed all the time. People misinterpret things all the time. Are there bad characters out there that give bad information? Absolutely, it happens. Unfortunately, this is reality. But at the end of the day, however liable those characters may be for giving you bad information, you have to take an active role and make sure the information you're looking at you have is accurate. And avoid cashing out early. If you have an account, again, this goes back to the emergency fund. You don't want to resort to taking loans or withdrawals out from retirement type of accounts. When you're saving money, there's going to be tax. Unfortunately, there's either tax before or after. How you save the money, where you save the money, and planning for tax efficiency is important. So if you're saving money for retirement, you want to know, do you want tax-free money in retirement, or do you want to pay taxes in retirement? Do you want a tax break today, or do you want a tax break tomorrow? What most people don't realize, and no one likes taxes, but it's not going to go away, is that we're in the lowest tax environment this nation's seen, right? And I thought we couldn't go lower, and we did. But in the 70s, we were upwards of 91, 94% was the highest bracket. There were 26 different brackets that people fell into. There's no guarantee that we're not going to go back up. So where do you want to be in 20 years when you retire with your taxation? How do you want your money to be treated? Are you deferring income today at a lower tax bracket through a 401k or an IRA, and you're not paying tax on that income today, and you're deferring it to a point when you retire and you're in a higher tax bracket? You can completely wipe out all of your growth and everything that you look to achieve for just because you're in a higher tax bracket in the future. So planning for that is ultimately important. Make a commitment to save, okay? Remind yourself of your goals on a regular basis. I personally, whenever I have a financial goal or any kind of quantitative goal, I like to draw myself a thermometer. You ever see like those fund collection, like the collection type of thermometers where they show like the level going higher and higher. So I have a dry erase board and I draw it. I'm not a good artist, but I make do. But I fill that in when I achieve it. And every day that I pass by my office, I see that dry erase board and I see where I am on my goal. So I keep accountable for my goals. And if you're not keeping yourself accountable to your goals, how are you going to know how far you have to go or where you need to be? So keep it and reminding yourself of your goals on a regular basis. You have a greater chance of success by doing that than by ignoring it and just hoping that it happens one day. Saving for your short, mid, and long-term goals. We talked about this. Your bucket number 1, bucket number 2, and bucket number 3. You have to work with a professional to know what amounts of your income are going to go to which bucket and how long and where you need to be and what those thresholds are. Here's another tough point to bring out. Pay yourself first. I call this the airplane theory. If you've been on a plane, the stewardess gets on the microphone and she says, in case of an emergency, put your mask on first and then help small children. That's exactly the same thing that I say to my clients when it comes to a financial plan. You need to achieve your goals first, your retirement goals, your medical bill, whatever you need to achieve first. And let's face it, I have 4 children. I hope to God if I need them, they're there, but there's no guarantee and I can't count on them. And I shouldn't put that burden on them in the first place, right? So you got to make sure that you're being taken care of first. People often say, well, I can't save for retirement because I have to save for college, or I can't put money in an emergency fund because I have to save for college. That's a noble idea. And I'm not telling you not to save for college, but there are alternatives to paying for college through retirement funds. And guess what? If you're not saving for an emergency fund and you have an emergency fund, where are you going to get that money from if you have an emergency? Probably the college fund that you've been saving into, which is just going to cost you penalties and taxes in the first place. So you're better off just saving for an emergency fund and then putting money into a college fund if your budget allows for it. But save for yourself first, and trust me, you'll be okay. Your children will be okay too. Consider having money automatically removed from your checking account, savings account. There are a lot of accounts that have automatic transfers. There are a lot of programs out there. It offers you an opportunity, what they call dollar cost averaging, buying investments at different times. But what the principle behind this is that when you don't see the money being moved, you don't think about it. Right? If I said, can you save $20 a week? You'd probably say, well, I don't know, maybe $20 a week is too much. But if it just happened, and you weren't seeing that money, you would have a savings account, and at one point in the future, you're going to be like, you know what? Oh my God, all of a sudden I've got $3,000 or $4,000 in this account. I didn't even feel it. Just the same way that debt creeps up on us and we're like, how did I accumulate $10,000 debt? Well, your savings will accumulate the same way. It works the same way, except for when you have a savings, you feel a lot better than having an accumulated amount of debt. Some of you may have hobbies. When you do what you love, you never work a day in your life, right? So if you have a hobby that you think you can make money and you have a gap between the income and the savings goals that you have, perhaps look at a way of making money in your hobbies. If you're a carpenter, maybe do weekend work doing carpentry work. I need a carpenter if anybody's a carpenter. But you may play golf really well. You may fish really well. Things like this, you can turn around easily and make a few dollars to help some goals along the way. Newfound money, tax refunds, inheritance, and gifts, right? How often do we learn, oh my God, I'm getting $5,000 back, or I'm inheriting this from Aunt Sally, or I just received this amount of money as a gift, right? Immediately we talk about, what can we buy? What are we gonna do with that money? Oh, we're getting $5,000 in a tax refund. We're gonna buy the TV, we're gonna buy the living room set, we spend the money before it even hits our account. And that's just human behavior because it's money that we didn't have. Right? And then we get this money and we think to ourselves, this is free money. Well, what if you took that money and you applied it towards your savings goals? Think about the people that were saving for retirement, went through this pandemic, and haven't been able to contribute to their retirement over the past 4 months. What kind of effect, compounding effect, would that have in the future, not making those contributions? Well, if they would have previously put that newfound money into their retirement, and something happened, well, guess what? They've overpaid into their retirement, so they're a little bit ahead of their goals. Therefore, not paying now, they're still going to achieve their goals. Versus the alternative, well, this happened and I couldn't contribute, and therefore I don't have enough. And remember the three fingers, right? Where's your accountability for things that you don't achieve within your plan? So this is a modest scale. If you were to save $25, $75, or $125 a week, and you were to earn 4% rate of return, this is what you would have in 25 years. Now, I say 4% a modest rate of return over a 25-year period. I think you can achieve more than that. Considering the S&P 500, which is an index that houses the largest 500 companies in the index, that generally earns about 8% over any 20-year period. Obviously, different years have different results. But over a 20-year period, you have an average of 8% return. If you got 8% compounding rate of return on your money, as if you benchmark the S&P and you mimic what the S&P does, think about what these numbers would be. So this is just showing you how much a little bit of money can go a long way in 25 years. We're going to talk about these things individually a little bit more, but the financial checkups, these are things that people don't think about when they're thinking about financial planning. They're not thinking about their health insurance. They're not thinking about long-term care. They're definitely not thinking about property and casualty. Some do about the life insurance and disability income. So we're going to talk about those things, but there's one thing I want to talk about that's not listed here, and that's a will. If you have children, you need a will. If you have children, you don't have a will, immediately after this, you need to find a way to get a will. What you don't realize is that if you don't have a will and you have children, and something happens to you, the children belong to the state. Now, Department of Children and Family may be kind, and they may give it to the next closest relative that says, I'll take care of the children. No one wants to put the children through foster care and temporary housing, etc., until it can go through the court system. But if you have a family, a large family, and maybe not everybody gets along, it can create an argument on who's going to take care of the children. That can create a lot more stress on the children. They're already grieving the loss of their parents, but now they've got to worry about where they're going to live and the family fighting over them, right? Not everything works out the way we hope it to work out. So if you have children, you need a will that at least states who's going to take care of your children. There's other reasons for a will, but that's the one that I'm most adamant about. Everything else, who cares? It's property, but these are your children's lives. So if you don't have a will and you have children, get a will put in place so at least the courts have your direction on where your children will be taken care of. So on a lighter note, health insurance. You may have it through work, or you may have it through the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. that most people refer to as the Obamacare. It's important to know what your health insurance, if you have high deductible, low deductible, what your out-of-pocket expenses are going to be, what's it going to cover. Think about if you don't know the coverage and you go to the doctor and you get a nice bill for $2,000 and you didn't realize that, well, the doctor wasn't in your network, or you didn't realize that certain things weren't covered in your insurance. Where's that $2,000 going to come from? That's right. It's going to come from your savings. Something that you probably didn't account for, but it's something you could have planned for had you known. The other thing to think about with health insurance is, do you pay a higher premium for a low deductible plan, which means that you're paying higher every single month, but yet you have a lower responsibility if you have to see a doctor? Well, if you're not someone that's often sick, you may not need to see a doctor or a specialist or prescriptions. Therefore, having that low deductible may give you peace of mind, but you could be throwing money away in the premiums. Perhaps you can get a higher premium policy, a lower premium policy with a higher deductible, which means that if you did, more money comes out of your pocket, but the money you're saving on a monthly basis, maybe you can put into an account that helps pay for the medical expenses. All a part of financial planning. Fortunately, my family, we're not a sickly family. We don't have medical needs. So we look at alternatives, and we want to make sure that we're putting our money to work for us for the long term. And health insurance is a big factor, very expensive factor in our lives. So you want to make sure you have the proper coverage. You want to understand what that coverage is. Very important. Long-term care. Long-term care, I dub it as asset preservation and dignity preservation. Long-term care provides care when you can't do for yourself. So you can't get out of bed, you can't get dressed, you can't feed yourself, you can't bathe yourself. It provides care. It's one insurance that is not covered through Medicare. It's not covered on your health insurance. This is something that you need to purchase outside. Back to the sandwich generation, right? If you have elderly parents, you may want to consider this for them, because do you want to be responsible for taking care of your parents? Or would you prefer to buy an insurance that will take care of them in a dignified way? And me, I pay for my mother's insurance because I know that if something were to happen to her, I would have to take care of her, which I want to take care of my mother. I love her. And I want her to be comfortable, but do I really want to spend that time taking care of my mother, or do I want to spend that time with my mother, spending time with my mother? So that's the decisions you have to make. And long-term care is especially when you're saving for retirement. If you don't have it, it could completely wipe out your retirement plans. And let me tell you, the number one provider for long-term care is the Social Security Administration. And if anybody's gone through this, it's horrible. It's called a Medicaid spend down. Essentially, if you need the government to pay for long-term care, they basically make you spend all your money before they do it. You have to become broke, indigent, before the government steps in. There are protections in place, and none of this, not everything is for everyone. This is generally speaking, but understand, if you don't have proper provisions in place and you're not protecting yourself, you can completely wipe out your goals. This is a really big subject when it comes to financial planning, because these 2 items or 3 items are probably the most common pitfalls that people have, right? Now, I'm not going to pick on any companies, but what's more important to you? Saving 15%, getting the cheapest discount? Or what if you got into an accident on 287, people got injured, ambulance, you ruined some property, 4 or 5 cars? Do you think that can get up to $500,000 worth of damages pretty quick? Who's going to pay for that $500,000 worth of damage? Especially when your coverage is only $50,000. So you have insurance for $50,000. Do you think the attorneys, if you're found at fault, do you think the opposing attorney is going to say, well, they only have $50,000 insurance, we'll settle? No, it's going to be a judgment against you. It's going to be a lien against you. It's going to be a dark cloud over your head for the rest of your life until you pay off $450,000. In that one example, how long is it going to take you to pay off $450,000 in a judgment, let alone your credit being ruined, maybe inability to get a job, and now saving for retirement, college, any of that? Who cares, right? Because now you're just paying off this accident. And most people don't realize, and this is what blows my mind, is that most people don't realize the difference between having $50,000 in liability coverage and $500,000 in liability coverage, maybe dollars per month. So everybody's always worried about saving money. What they don't realize is that you may be saving a couple of dollars on the premium, but it could be costing you a whole lot more money. God forbid you need the insurance. And when people are being distracted today, accidents aren't the same. There's no more, fender bender. These are like people are ramming into one another. So having the protection, making sure you review your policies is very important. The same with homeowners and umbrella insurance. An umbrella policy covers you over and above your other insurances. It also gives you additional protection. It gives you legal representation. So understanding how this type of insurance will help protect you and your savings is vital. Folks, don't cheap out on this. If you're going to compare apples to apples, make sure you have the coverage that you need and then compare coverage. Don't just buy the cheapest insurance. The worst thing that could happen to you. Life insurance. Life insurance is to protect income, expenses. If you want to fulfill your college education for your children, estate needs, creating a legacy, charitable. If you have a business, most business owners don't take care of themselves. Business owners generally have the worst finances because they're so busy running their business. But life insurance is an important part of continuing a business, especially if you have a passion and you want that business to continue. But here's some other things about life insurance that I want to point out. Number one, it's age-based and it's medically based. So the younger you are, the healthier you are, the better rate you're going to get. The older you are and the less healthy you are, the more you're going to pay. And the chances are you could get denied. So be proactive about it. No one likes to buy life insurance. No one looks forward, wakes up and says, oh my God, I can't wait to buy life insurance today. And most people that look to buy life insurance is because they had a life experience where they felt like life insurance was important, whether they lost somebody or they had a near loss. That's typically when people say, I need to get life insurance. Update your beneficiaries on life insurance. I can't stress this enough. People don't stay married very long anymore. If you're married, you have beneficiaries, your wife, you get divorced, you get remarried. If your beneficiary is still your ex-wife and you pass away, guess who's getting the money? Your ex-wife. The beneficiaries on your financial accounts trump a will or anything else. It does not matter. What is on your life insurance contract, what is on your financial contract, those companies will pay out accordingly. So make sure you're updating your beneficiaries. You may have parents who passed away as your beneficiaries. They can't pay your parents if you pass away because they predeceased you. So make sure you update your beneficiaries. Term versus permanent, another big thing for people. I can't, it's countless times over the years that people have come in and said to me, I didn't realize this was a term policy. I thought I had a policy for the rest of my life. I thought I was paying $15 a month and this would cover me to the day I die. First of all, it doesn't make any sense. But second of all, that's that accountability. You got to read your documentation. But more importantly, from a proactive approach, understand what term insurance does, the pros and cons to term insurance, and understand how permanent insurance works and the pros and cons to permanent insurance. The biggest surprise to many people is they think that permanent insurance, most people call whole life insurance permanent insurance. There are multiple types of permanent insurance. Whole life is just one, so that's why I say permanent insurance. But the biggest surprise to many people is that in the long run, permanent insurance is less expensive than term. And we can show you how, but trust me when I tell you, in the long run, permanent insurance is less expensive than term. And oftentimes people look for the term alternatives, and there are good times to have term, but it's not the answer for all. So understanding the type of insurance you have and how it's going to affect your plan is important. Disability. According to the Social Security Administration, 25% of 20-year-olds will become disabled before they retire. Now, we're all going to die, but we're more likely to suffer a disability from an accident than we are to die from an accident. Disability insurance, I call paycheck protection. Most employers offer it, but again, it's important to understand what that coverage is for. How long is it going to last you? How much is it going to pay you? Is it for the rest of your life? Is it for 6 months? How long do you need to wait until those benefits kick in? Well, if you don't have, let's say you have to wait 3 months. Well, remember that emergency bucket? If you got to wait 3 months before you have money coming in from a disability, but it's only going to last you 6 months. Well, you have 9 months. After 9 months, you have your emergency bucket for 3 months. You have disability for 6 months. What are you going to do for 9 months after if you're not back to work? So understanding the different types, there's short-term, long-term, you have waiting periods, different definitions of disability, you have inflation. These are all things that you want to be cognizant of when you're buying disability insurance. Retirement. How much will you need? I love this question. First and foremost, the first question I ask couples are this. Do either of you know what your goals are in retirement? Have you had a conversation on how you want to retire? Majority of them have not. They don't discuss it. It's amazing what couples don't discuss. Now, knowing this, I had a conversation with my wife, and I have a dilemma because I want to retire on a farm, and she wants to retire on a beach somewhere. So we've got to make that happen somehow, some way. But we understand. But more importantly, our lifestyle is going to lead to how much money we need. You know, oftentimes people are saving for retirement. What are they saving for? How do they know how much money they're going to need? How do they know to account for inflation or what taxes are going to be? So they're just dumping money in a 401k. Well, I contribute 10% of my money into a 401k. That's great. Is that enough? Are you properly invested? So these are questions that you have to ask yourself. So if you don't know how much you're going to need in retirement, how can you plan to save for it? That's like saying, I'm planning for a trip, but I don't know where I'm going. How much gas are you going to need? How much food are you going to need? How much money are you going to need? So you gotta be able to save for retirement. But more importantly, discuss this with your partner. This is about inflation. This just goes to show you that expenses starting out today, if your basic fixed expenses are $3,400 today, in 20 years from now, that same $3,400 is going to be $6,700. Now, is that guaranteed? No. We planned inflation for 3%. Financial planners use 3%. Inflation every year, 3%? No. But historically, since 1913, it's averaged about 3.25%. So that's why we use 3% for inflation. But knowing what you need in the future, you have to account for inflation. Medical costs in retirement. Generally speaking, a 65-year-old couple today will spend about $285,000 out of pocket in healthcare and medical expenses, whether it's prescriptions, specialists, etc. It's the #1 depletion of retirement assets known in financial planning is medical costs. So you have to plan for it. Goals can change over time, right? When reviewing your plan or creating a plan, you want to make sure that you're accounting for things that can change. So what can change? Taxes can change, inflation rates can change, incomes can change, sizes of families can change. These are all things that can happen throughout your life that can alter your goals, that if you're not constantly reviewing your plan and adapting to these changes, could end up in a shortfall in the future. So it's not something you want to set it and forget it, okay? You may plan to have your kid go to state college and save for $40,000 a year education, but yet your kid's really smart and they want to go to an Ivy League school and, you know, a degree costs $180,000. Well, you have a problem, or they have a problem. They're going to have a lot of student debt, or hopefully they saved a lot of money up from the inheritances they got. So how do you save your money? I've talked to clients of all types, right? You have people that are like, I'm all cash, I'm not in the market, I'm not losing any money, I'm putting the money under my mattress, right? That was my father. He was an old school Italian. You know, he didn't believe in anything. You know, anything you told him, I can do better. So that was his mentality. God bless him. The person who's 100% in cash, yeah, guess what? There's no risk. There's very little risk. They're not going to lose money because, you know something, they're not risking their money. No risk, no reward. Okay. But they also have a low growth potential. In fact, there's a negative growth potential. Consider the fact that you have a 3% rate of inflation. So if I have $100 today and I stuff it under my mattress, or I put it in my savings account that doesn't earn any interest, next year, based upon those principles, that $100 can afford me $97 worth of goods. The following year, less. And the following year, less. So maybe 5 years down the road, I have a $100 bill that's buying me $85 worth of goods. So cash, yeah, it's safe. Do you need to have cash? Yes. But all cash? I don't know. 100% stocks, equities, investments, that's very high risk. You have a great opportunity to grow your money, right? High risk, high return opportunity, not guaranteed. So you can make a lot of money, you can lose a lot of money. Do you want to be in that volatile situation? Well, not necessarily. Because if you have an emergency, you don't want to be in a time where the market just crashed and you lost all of your money. And then you got to pull money out and you got to realize those losses. So that's why timing your goals and knowing how to invest your money is important, but most importantly, diversifying your portfolio to create or facilitate those goals, right? The basket number 1, 2, and 3, obviously emergency funds is cash. You can have money, more riskier types of investments in your retirement because it's a longer time away. And then maybe your middle bucket, you're not as risky because you may need the money in 2 or 3 years and you don't want to take as much risk. So understanding how to diversify your portfolio and diversifying it accordingly is important. Over the long term, the markets have proven that you'll grow. I mentioned that the S&P 500 comprised of 500 companies. It's a major index. Many investment portfolios benchmark it. And therefore, if you're investing, chances are you're going to earn money over a long period of time. But it's a long period of time. If you were saving for money for the summer and you put the money in the market in December, you could be in trouble right now because you lost a significant amount of money through this COVID experience and the volatility, right? And the emotions, and it's crazy. So understanding and saving for a long period of time and knowing what type of investments to make for the time period is very important. I should say the market offers no guarantees. So I'm not telling you if you save for a long period of time, you're guaranteed to make an interest rate, because that's not possible. Just like if you save for a short period of time, you're guaranteed not to lose money. The market represents volatility, which is up and down. There's speculation. You can make money, you can lose money. But it's very important you understand how you're investing your money and understanding the principles of investing before you do it. And obviously working with a professional. You know, we can all go on E-Trade and open accounts for free. Wait 45 minutes to an hour to get somebody on the phone, that's another story. But you can go on E-Trade and you can transfer. If you know what you're doing, you're taking a lot more risk by doing it yourself. But if you enroll the help of a professional, that's going to usually do better for you. People, historically speaking, people who use a professional make a higher return than people who don't. And a lot of that has to deal with emotions and technicals. So just food for thought on the investment world. Social Security. Early on, we had a question about Social Security. I'm an optimist. I am in my mid-40s. I believe Social Security will be around, and I don't think it'll ever go away. But the consideration is, do I take it early? Do I take it at normal retirement age, or do I wait, right? There's many plannings on Social Security, and when you're talking about retirement, and we're going to talk about fixed incomes in retirement, Social Security is a primary source of fixed income. The question is, how long do you think you're going to live? This slide shows you if you are going to take Social Security early and you live a long time, ultimately you're going to end up with less money. If you wait and you live a long time, you're going to make more money. So the break-even points are indicated on the slide with the green lines. That's basically where you break even. So the conversation is, well, how long do you think you're going to live, right? How much longevity do you have? And also, do you need the money? So I don't want to give an opinion. I have an opinion. I don't want to give an opinion because everybody's situation is unique. And it's important that you understand that your situation is unique and everything about you is unique. Therefore, you need to do unique planning for yourselves. Estate planning. Everybody has to do estate planning. People say, I don't have any money to do estate planning. Guess what? If you own a home and that home was in your name, and you later got married, and now you and your wife live in that home, or your spouse or your husband or whoever live in that home together, and you haven't updated the title and you die, your spouse doesn't get the home automatically because that home was held in your name only, even though that's your spouse. Basically, it goes to your estate. And anybody can go to the court through the probate process and contest your estate and say, well, I deserve the house. I deserve the house. I deserve the house. So estate planning is not just, oh, well, the threshold is over $22 million. I don't have an estate problem. That's not true. You may have an estate problem. And even when you're talking about financial thresholds and what the estate tax thresholds are, doesn't mean that it's not going to change, right? We've seen zero estate. We've seen 1 million, 5 million, 11 million, 22 million. We've seen various numbers over the history. So you got to know and plan for that. But everybody has to have an estate. Updating your beneficiaries we talked about. People don't realize that if you die with or without a will, your estate will go through probate unless your property is titled, like your home is titled, joint with the right of survivorship, or has a title that automatically grants somebody the property upon your death. Financial accounts have beneficiaries that won't go through probate. But things that are not properly titled, things that if you don't have a trust set up, even if you have a will, it's going to go through probate. Probate has legal fees. It has probate court fees. More importantly, there's 6 to 24 months. The New York State is backed up, and maybe even longer now, considering the COVID. So you want to try to avoid as many estate problems as possible, because yeah, you may not be here to deal with it, but you're leaving that mess behind. Maybe the people you intended to receive certain things won't receive it after all. So assemble a team. Remember what I told you about the doctor, right? Having an attorney, having a tax advisor, an accountant, a CPA, a financial professional, having these people work for you, review. A lot of them will even offer you free consultations. You can ask them questions. But assembling a team to work for you really will help you in the most efficient way. Don't go at it alone. I know there's a lot of resources out there that you can look into it. And I'm not trying to sell you services, but the reality is this. The 3-finger rule. You can point at everybody else, but the 3 fingers back at you. If you don't take the accountability to do things and get the, if you don't do what you need to do to take care of yourself, it falls on you. And hiring the professionals are going to help you in the right way. At least they're going to tell you what is most available. Attorney will keep you hopefully out of jail. Tax will keep you from in trouble with the IRS. And financial planners should be able to afford you the opportunity to maximize your savings. So in the military, we used to say the 5 Ps. Prior planning prevents poor performance. People don't plan to fail, they fail to plan. With that being said, I want to thank all of you for joining me today. I want to thank all of you for taking the time out to be on the webinar. I hope, and I do believe that I provided some value to everyone on the webinar. Certainly, myself, I would love to work with anyone that has any questions directly. You have my phone number, that's my direct line, my email. Feel free to email me, call me, ask your questions now as we move into the questions. And I'll be happy to help you that way as well. A couple of resources. One, I'm going to send out the income and expense form. The other thing is the Prudential website. We do have calculators on there. So if you want to do some research on your own, we have a lot of calculators. My team and I, we have technology tools to help you track your goals that we can discuss as well. So feel free to leverage those resources. So with that being said, I'd like to open up for any questions we have.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful information. And we do have quite a number of questions. One specifically to what you just mentioned. What is a credit counselor? And do you need one in addition to a financial planner?
Yeah, so, that's a great question. And that's a really gray area because there are a lot of people out there that talk about credit repair and stuff. And I got to be honest with you, there's no silver bullet. There's no way to repair your credit magically. It takes work. A credit counselor, for an example, I would consider myself someone that can advise somebody on their credit, how debt works and how to improve their credit, etc. There are people out there, nonprofit organizations that offer credit counseling, which is an educational program that teaches people how credit works, how to achieve good credit scores, and how to manage their credit. Because credit, that's all we have is our credibility when we're looking at major purchases. So definitely financial professionals, if they're properly licensed and trained, they can help you. But also there are a lot of nonprofit organizations that help you in the credit counseling area.
Okay, great. So we had some questions around kids. One was, is how young is too young to purchase life insurance? Is that something that you would purchase for a teenager? And does life insurance cost less if you buy it earlier in life?
Yeah. That's a very common question. And, I'm going to be honest with you, we talked about the airplane theory. So I always tell parents this: life insurance on children is a nicety, not a necessity. Okay. You get a lot of people that will try to sell life insurance policies for children. And I'm not saying it's not good. It is. Obviously planning, right? Because there are some children who may develop illnesses where they may not be able to get life insurance when they get older. So buying a policy today can make sure that they have some form of life insurance. So that's a positive. But are you saving enough for retirement? Do you have an emergency fund? Are you appropriately, prioritizing your funds? So if you don't have money you're saving for retirement and you don't have money that you have in your emergency fund, are you going to allocate those funds to a child's life insurance policy? Probably not a good thing to do. But if you're hitting all of the other targets and you want to discuss the pros and cons, then yeah, absolutely, life insurance for a child is fine. And I have parents that buy life insurance the minute they come out, 0 years old, right? The minute a baby is born, they're eligible for life insurance. And so, there are people that do that, but what's important is to make sure that you're achieving all of the other more important aspects of your financial plan. So, I would first look at what you need to achieve, what your goals are. And if you're achieving those goals, then we can discuss it. If not, then I would put that on the back burner until you're getting there. And then we can discuss the life insurance for the children. But to answer the question, yes, children are conceivably less expensive because they're younger. But it all depends on the type of insurance you buy, et cetera. But again, I think it's a nicety, not a necessity.
Okay, great. Well, what if you don't have children? What if you're single? Do you need life insurance?
So that's another great question. So I always ask clients, well, who's going to pay for you? How are your affairs going to be settled? Do you own property? If you own property and you have equity in your estate, but you have a small mortgage, do you want that property to be lost, or do you want somebody to benefit from that, right? Who's going to handle your affairs if you're passed away? I'm sure that we all have somebody in the world, whether it be a sibling, a cousin, a friend, a parent, God forbid, there's going to be, I would say 99.9% of the time, whether you're an individual, you have a family, you got to have planning involved. And when you die, there's going to be expenses regardless. So I think planning for that is important. And yeah, so if you're single, you got to think about the expenses that are involved in your death, not just funeral costs, but handling your affairs.
Yeah, it's hard enough for people dealing with the grief. Then it gets complicated if they don't have really any direction on that as well. Absolutely. So we also got a few questions in about college funds. One person wanted to know if a 521 college fund is a good idea, and also how to pay back educational debt. Is there like a rule of thumb of a percentage of your annual income, and whether or not it's better to use loans or personal savings to finance a college education? So I thought I'd clump all those together and maybe you can kind of address the college education questions.
Well, let's face it, right? I think beyond people's mortgage, probably most professionals, the largest debt they have beyond their mortgage is their college student loans, right? I think doctors, attorneys, professionals, and even those that aren't professionals, incur college debt. And I think it's pretty sad that, so much college debt is out there. So what I will say is this, there's a couple of things. Number one, 529s are a good savings mechanism, but you got to be careful because there's a lot of options with 529s, and you got to know what you're buying into before you buy into it. Again, knowing what you got and what to expect out of it, is important when you're doing that. However, what I'll say is there are a lot of credits. You have the lifetime learning credit. You have the American opportunity credit. There's different credits that you can receive based upon your incomes. So you have tax incentives. There are teachers that, pertaining to certain school districts will pay off if they're a teacher for like 10 years, public service. They get debt forgiveness on student loans. So depending on the profession you're going into or where you end up, you may want to figure that out. You may also be able to, like, let's say if you're going to go work for a particular company, they may offer some kind of reimbursement. So there are a lot of ways to pay back college debt. There are a lot of ways to save for college. What I will say is this, for parents considering saving, again, the airplane theory, think about yourself first and your children second. Student debt, we don't know. What I can say is that from an inflation standpoint, and we're talking about educational inflation, we account for 5% educational inflation. So in other words, when we're saving money today, we got to assume that the education is going to cost us 5% more every single year. So again, it's hard to say specifically because everybody's needs are different. I think you have to look at what school you want to go to, what you're doing with your other money. But there are a lot of ways to get debt forgiveness. You can refinance student loans. sometimes for lower interest rate. So that's really a personal thing. But yes, there's a lot of ways to do it. And unfortunately, not one single answer because everybody's situation is different.
Terrific. Well, this has been so helpful. And I think, not only did you give such valuable information and things that people can do right away, but I think you also really brought to the forefront how individual the needs are, and that, working with someone who can speak to what specifically you need is really a very important piece of it.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for that. And people are saying thank you and have enjoyed the presentation. Please do reach out to Jay. His contact information is in the chat. We'll also have it out to you in an email. You'll be able to see the video of this webinar. It'll be shared on the Checkups Media YouTube channel by the end of the week. And Jay will be following up with you and sending some of those valuable tools that will get you started. And just thank you so much. I wish that you all stay healthy and safe. And Jay, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I can only echo that, we're in unprecedented times. And, one thing we have is our health. And I wish everyone, stay safe and good health to you, your loved ones, and everyone you know.
Amen to that. Thanks so much. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.